Well, congratulations. You're seniors. Oh, in a crazy world, huh? But, congrats. That's a big deal, and I gotta say, so exciting, from as teachers, our perspective, to be with you at this point in your life in such circumstances that, I can't help but, really be excited. Um, one of the things I love about teaching is running into students, years after they've, graduated, and for some reason it always happens at Costco. I don't know, um, but I love, hearing what's been going on in their life, and I was so struck by one in particular. This was quite a while ago. By the way, I'm Mr. Hendricks, and will be teaching along with Mr. Primer uh, economics, and just really, boy, what a time to be talking about what we're talking about. Nevertheless, I love running into these students of mine because I'm catching up, and it is amazing what happens in someone's life in relatively short period of time. I'll have students that literally, the one in particular at Costco, within a year, literally married with a kid on the way, and huge things. And for many of you as seniors, you are kind of at this fork in the road where your whole life you've had this one plan, and now many of you will be going, um, some of you out of the state, some of you around the world, um, making some monumental decisions. I find it absolutely exciting that we get to be in your life at this point, because hopefully over the span of the time we're together, we may talk about something that might make your life better. And that to me is incredible. So, with that in mind, I want to kind of get us going here. Um, we are living in monumental times. Some might even say we haven't seen something like this in literally 500 years. We'll touch on that a little bit later. Um, in um, that way, it requires that we start to do something a little bit differently. First of all, it requires that we think. But second of all, it requires that we start thinking differently. So, with that in mind, I wanted to share a thing or two with you. Um, Years ago, this was literally 2 decades ago, my dad had a friend that was the biggest person in cotton, literally for decades. And when you think about cotton, cotton is not just something, literally right now you have something on you that is made of cotton. And you multiply that times how many people there are, and you get cotton is a big deal. And he was the biggest deal for decades. Literally, he knows stuff, new stuff that the rest of us don't know. Literally, 1/10 of 1% is what the people that know what he knows. And my dad was able to, get it so that I could sit with him and just kind of pick his brains. And in this hour span, he shared some just life changing insight with me. And as we go forward, thought I might share some of those with you. One of the things that really struck me was he said, beware of the warmth of the masses. Beware of the warmth of the masses. And when you hear that, it's like, wow, we ever been to some place where there's a lot of people, and maybe it's at a concert, maybe it's on a dance floor or whatever. But when you get a lot of people in one place, the temperature goes up a little bit. And what he's saying is, hey, you know what? That is exactly where you do not want to be. You want to be where it's cold. And it made me think of this poem many of you probably have heard before. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by. And that has made all the difference. I encourage you, as we go through this time, to think. Never been in a period of time where you probably need to think more than we are now. There is tremendous change going on. And if we don't think, we are probably going to feel some pain for that. So we need to start thinking. And I would argue that we need to actually start thinking differently. If we start thinking like everybody on the dance floor, if we start thinking like where it's warm, we're probably going to be led in the wrong direction. The masses' social mood is right in the middle of trends. But when we get to the extreme in trends, that is where the masses tend to be really wrong. It's important for us to be able to separate ourselves and to be able to think differently. There's many note as the greatest hockey player of all times, and his name is Wayne Gretzky. And Wayne Gretzky has the nickname as being the Great One. They asked Wayne, why are you great? Why are you the best at hockey, at ice hockey? And Wayne said, others skate to where the puck, that's the circular thing, where the puck is. I skate to where the puck is going. Others skate to where the puck is. I skate to where the puck is going. As we are in this period of transition, if we skate to where the puck is, we are probably going to be doing the things that worked in the old days, but don't work now, or will not work in the days to come. We need to be thinking ahead, preparing, and putting ourselves in a position to hopefully be able to take advantage of those things. So this idea of trying to skate to where the puck is going. So how do we do that? Back in the 1970s, there's a matter of fact, I believe he's still alive, the founder of Intel. Intel makes the little computer chips that go into your computer. And one of the founders, his name's Gordon Moore. Gordon Moore's genius, absolutely amazing human, incredible mind. And back in the beginning of the computing era, Gordon Moore came to the realization that the speed and power of the microprocessor, that chip that goes into computers, that's in your phone and so forth, the speed and the power of the microprocessor was going to double every 18 months. Double every 18 months. Now you think that, you're a big deal, who cares, right? But the thing here is that if it doubles every 18 months, that is not a linear progression. That is an exponential or geometric progression. And that has led to a monumental change over the last, what's coming up at 50 years, because of the power and the speed of that cell phone, of that computer, of the chip that goes into it. Everything has changed. Before that, the organizational chart, the way that organizations were formed, were on a pyramid where you had the person who had the information and the knowledge and the power was at the top. They would make the decision, disseminate that down to the people on the bottom, and then it would be carried out by the people on the bottom. In the 70s, Gordon Moore realized that, hey, you know what? Now with the microprocessor, that old organizational chart, that structure, would no longer work. Is that crazy? He realized that instead of the organizational chart being a pyramid, it would actually be an upside down pyramid. In other words, he said that the people with the power would now be the people with the information. And the people with the information were not the people at the top of the pyramid, but rather the people on the edges, at the bottom. They were the salespeople. The salespeople were out talking to the customers. They knew what the competition was doing. They knew what customers liked about their product, what they didn't like about their product. They were the ones with the information. Gordon Moore believed so much in this that to this day, if you go into an office pre-Gordon Moore, offices, you'd go to an office building and everybody had walls. Each person had their own little office separated from everybody else. Gordon Moore realized, hey, you know what? This is this. Ripped out the walls, put up cubicles, and now, what at least is in the waning days, what it looks to be of offices, you go and they don't have offices. They have literally these cubicles. And the reason is because the people needed to talk to each other and communicate. That was revolutionary. The idea and the realization was now the old structure of big, centralized, and concentrated would no longer be the winning game plan. We now needed something that was decentralized, small, and to the edges. That model would work. And we have seen this play out over the years, and it's absolutely crazy. I mean, you think about, Blockbuster. I don't know if, some of you were old enough maybe to remember what a Blockbuster is. Blockbuster, video rentals, we don't do that anymore. It's now to the edge that you get it at your house, right? Newspapers, big and centralized, they're gone. Banks, as we know them, are basically being cannibalized because they have what are called legacy costs. Legacy costs are costs that they still have that in the old model was an advantage, but in the new model is absolutely probably their fatal blow. Banks have branches. Branches in the old days was a huge advantage. It gave your customers a place to go, access their money, and the more branches you had, the more people wanted to bank with you. Now, fast forward to the new model, to the edges, efficient. And you know what? Now, a startup bank that's an online bank has none of those expenses. Do you know how expensive it is to open and run a branch? Incredibly expensive. So banks that in the old days had an advantage, now that very same advantage is probably what will seal their fate. The idea here is you have to be to the edges, quick, efficient, all because of this technological change. Is it crazy? And what's just absolutely amazing is think about warfare. In the old days, if you had the most troops, if you had the bomb, if you had the most tanks, you were the power. But what's warfare now? Warfare is literally terrorism. The morning of 9/11, before you were born, I was working at school really early, so it was probably 6 o'clock, and I had the news on CNBC with the sound muted while I was working. And I looked up, and I have to say, I was absolutely blown away when that happened. Because I realized that something that I had read previously was unfolding before my very eyes. And that was this book that I read 20 years ago called The Sovereign Individual. Absolutely amazing. It's these historians / economists that look back at history and then try to anticipate. And they wrote several books before this one they wrote in 1998. But their premise is this. It's twofold. Actually, it's multifold. But the idea is that, people say, hey, can you judge the future? Can you predict the future? People go, there's no way. But check this out. If I were to drop a $100 bill out on the street, crowded place, I can predict someone will pick that $100 bill up. I predicted the future, didn't I? How? And the idea, and one of the keys here, is understanding incentives. We will see throughout, we study economics, that incentives is a tremendous foundation on which we build our theories and our decisions. Understanding incentives can oftentimes lead us to be able to correctly anticipate the way direction is going. So with that in mind, these two authors basically looking back at history 20 years ago, and it blows me away, they realized that as a result of all of this, the technology and having cell phones, that this whole model would basically change. And subsequently, I mean, it's been amazing. And the idea was that small to the edges would win. They anticipated terrorism. They anticipated all these things that were a byproduct of this microprocessor. And it's fascinating because one of the other premises that they talk about is that if you look back at history, the dominant culture, whether it be the Greeks, the Romans, the British, the Dutch, well, Dutch, British, French, and then us, every single one of those dominant cultures, every single one has had the technological advantage in warfare. The Greeks had these boats called triremes that they could ram their opponent with. Romans had roads they could cover and protect more territory more quickly, more efficiently. You had the Dutch put cannons on their ships. And then we had satellite, right? And as long as you have the technological advantage in warfare, amongst other things, that gives you the advantage and leads to your dominance. Well, the argument is that, okay, well, we've had the dominance. So the question is, roughly dominant culture lasts 100 to maybe 150, 200 years. The question is, well, who gets it next? And back 20 years ago, they anticipated that some would say they thought it was China. They don't necessarily go that way. They thought, and here's what I'm talking about, thinking differently. They threw out the idea of potentially feudalism. Feudalism? Are you kidding? Feudalism is the Dark Ages, right? That was, but once again, this idea of to the edges, small, and the idea that big and centralized doesn't work. And absolutely amazing. And one of the other things, just a side note that I think is fascinating, is think about cities. Do cities fit the model of decentralized, small to the edges? Fascinating. Let's see what happens with cities over the next 10, 20, 30 years and see, maybe we might see direction moving a different way. But once again, this idea of trying to anticipate, right, and skate in the direction. And the idea here is trying to climb the right ladder on the right wall. It's very possible we can be, if we're playing the old model, that we've all been kind of raised to do, we're climbing possibly the right ladder, but is it quite possibly against the wrong wall? And we can be climbing the right ladder, but if it's on the wrong wall, we're probably not going to get the best solutions. We want to be climbing the right wall, right ladder on the right wall. So, how do we do that? Well, farmer, wealthy farmer, absolutely very, very successful, gets wiped out in the crash of 71. Wiped out in the crash of 71, loses everything. And in the aftermath of trying to piece together, what happened? Why was there some thing that I overlooked? What could I have done differently? Studies pig iron prices. Pig iron prices. Pig iron is what goes into iron, right? Into rails and stuff like that, for railroads and so forth. But studies the price of pig iron and finds that there's actually some kind of potential hint to what actually possibly might have led to his. Check this out. Now, what this posits a recurring cycle that basically says, and this is known as the Benner-Fibonacci cycle. And let's take a look. So it basically says that you have these intervening tops. 8, 9, 10 years, 8, 9, 10 years. And you'll notice that the M's, if you want to call them that, have a big leg up where the economy is expanding. Then you have a recession, which would be the small leg down, followed by a rather small leg up, and then followed by a big leg down, which would be a recession/depression. He noticed, studying this, that there seemed to be a pattern here. Absolutely amazing. By the way, the crash of 71 he got wiped out in was the crash of 1871, not 1971, 1871. So check this out. This is the pattern set out, and here is the at the Dow Jones Industrial Average, basically the stock market over the last 100 years. And you'll notice that his model anticipates a bottom in 1903. You know what? Bottom in 1903. Anticipates a top in 1910. Well, might be a year or two, but pretty doggone good. 1913 is actually 1914. Remember World War II, right? And then 1919, the super high inflation leads into a big sell-off into 21, and then you remember the roaring 20s. And sure enough, and realize this guy, Samuel T. Benner, is dead by 1929. His model calls this top in 29, and sure enough, the depression tipped off by the stock market crash into 1932. So it's not perfect, right? Pretty doggone close to it for a dead guy, 1933 bottoms, 1937 we get a top, and then we sell off into the beginning of World War II. And you'll compare that with the Dow Jones Industrial Average down there at the bottom. Amazing that here's this guy dead for 100 years, and he calls the top in 2000. He calls a bottom in 2003. Just crazy. And if you notice something, and where there's some application here for us, and once again, we're trying to anticipate and learn so that maybe we can have a better life as we go forward, make better decisions, and as a result, hopefully make it better for those around us. You'll notice that he calls a top in 2018, and notice what follows into 2021. Interesting. Now realize he doesn't call him perfect, right? I mean, he's dead. Give him a break. But it's pretty doggone amazing that, holy cow. Anyway, something to think about. And wouldn't you, if given the option, wouldn't you rather have a weather person than not to have a weather person? Do they ever get it right? No, right? Well, okay, yeah, they do, but usually they're, not exactly spot on. My point is this: if you can get some economic, weather, and you know what? Hey, realize I'm just a little school teacher. I know zero. I know nothing. All right, so take everything with a grain of salt, and but think, and be willing to think differently. All right, now let's fast forward to somebody who's in our modern times. This is a theory that's posited by the most successful hedge fund manager of modern times. His name is Ray Dalio. Ray Dalio runs Bridgewater Capital, is the founder. Incredibly successful. I'm a little school teacher. I know zero. This guy has a track record of being brilliant, getting it right. We should probably look at this. So what Dalio argues is that basically the economy is driven by debt, the lending and borrowing of money. And he believes there's two different debt cycles, that there's a short-term debt cycle, which is roughly, we'll say, 7 to 10 years or so. And then there's a bigger debt cycle, which is a long-term debt cycle, which he, will argue goes from, about basically 70 to 100 years in length. And what he believes is we are at this point where he has he makes it analogous to 1937. If you remember our graph from the previous, that was a previous top as well. 37 was, that led into World War II. Nevertheless, the point is this, is if somebody as smart as Ray Dalio is saying that, hey, there's clouds, maybe it's good to listen. And whether he's right or not, but maybe to at least listen. And then what do? How do you prepare for what's ahead? Not what's behind, but what's ahead. So I leave that with you, and need to keep moving here. I don't want to take up your whole day, but gosh, it's so good. So good to be together talking about stuff that really, I think, can change your life. And I really hope. Well, there is legend goes, a yacht race between countries. And in the course of this one race, in the preparation leading up to it, all the teams had the map of the course, and were given to propose their strategies in that, amongst their team. And there was a weather disturbance that was going to be basically right in the middle of the course. And so all the teams from different countries were basically taking, evasive action in their plans to go around this weather disturbance. The French team, though, knowing full well there was danger in this weather disturbance, chose a different route and decided, you know what, let's do this. Let's just strap ourselves down and let's just go right through it, knowing full well that it was dangerous. They didn't win, but they came in second. The point is this, is they knew there was danger. They prepared for it, and they used it to their advantage. The Chinese culture, very old, very tradition, been around for a long time. They don't do things willy-nilly. This is a word in Chinese, and you'll notice there's two characters to it. There's one on the left and there's one on the right. And this is one word, and the word is crisis. The word is crisis. Interesting. It's interesting because the word crisis has two characters, and one character you would probably guess is danger. But maybe not so common sense, maybe even more interesting. The second character in crisis is opportunity. Opportunity. And so if Benner's right, if Ray Dalio is right, if we are at the beginning of this structural change, you know what? Then maybe there's danger, but there's opportunity as well. Just like the French team, knowing full well there was danger in the course, they used it. They understood, they took action, and they used it to their benefit. It's interesting. I just thought of this as the plane goes overhead. But the last time I mentioned earlier that this, the last time we saw something like this might somewhat argue have been 500 years ago. If you recall, remember we're talking about centralized and decentralized. 500 years ago, all the power, the knowledge, the decision-making was centralized. It was in the church. The church had all the knowledge. They could read. The people couldn't. They had all the books. People didn't. Printing press comes along. Technology changes the whole thing. Instead of centralized power, now it puts power to the edges. And now people could learn. And as a result, it led to the Renaissance. Is that incredible? There's opportunity. I encourage you, as we go through it, we have an exciting trip ahead of us. Think and think differently.